Good morning and welcome to this Mandela Talk series. So this is the second in a series of Mandela Talks that the Center for Human Rights at the University of Pretoria is co-hosting with the Leading Like Mandela Institute and the Thembekile Mandela Foundation. Thank you very much for taking the time to be with us, and I am hoping that we will have a very good discussion this morning. So we all know that in 1994, Nelson Mandela himself declared the 9th of August as National Women's Day here in South Africa. So today, in celebration of Women's Day and also Women's Month, we want to celebrate the power of women to transform the world. So in doing so, we are not only celebrating the 20,000 brave women who marched to the Union buildings in 1990 to protest the apartheid past laws, but we are also celebrating the many, many women present and past who have dedicated their lives to the pursuit of equal rights for women, as well as the empowerment of women. And also, we are also celebrating the legacy of Nelson Mandela himself, who embodied this idea of equality between the sexes, and really fought very hard to ensure that this became a reality in his lifetime. And I must note that even as we are thinking about and celebrating the power of women to transform the world, we are doing it in a very uncertain time with the COVID-19 pandemic that has hit the world so hard. But we also know that it has also really had a gendered effect on women. So women have been the casualties of COVID-19 in many, many ways that some of them we have seen, some of them we are seeing for the first time, but it has generally disrupted the way that we all do life, the way that women do life. And so it has had many unexpected effects on our lives. And it has also really highlighted the fault lines of inequality that were already existent in our societies. So we have lost loved ones to the pandemic. We have suffered the disease itself. We have had to take on new responsibilities. We've lost incomes. It's been many things that have happened to us as people and also to women specifically. So even as we are reflecting on women's power to change the world this morning, I really think that the epidemic has also shown us that we cannot have yesterday's solutions. We need to be thinking of new ways of doing life. And I'm hoping that even as we have this discussion this morning, that some of the speakers will also start to speak to us towards what is the new direction that we should be going as a people to ensure gender equality. But I'm not going to take up a lot of your time. I really just wanted to welcome you to the webinar. But before we start, I am sure that on your screens, you are seeing a poll that we have. I just want to draw your attention to that poll and kindly ask that all of us take some time to answer the questions on the poll. It's more than one question, so please scroll down and answer the questions. We'll give you a few minutes to do that, and then we will look at what the poll has brought out for us. And so please do answer the questions. Again, welcome to this talk. And also, before I even go to the speakers, I just want to say that the webinar itself is being recorded, and it is also being live streamed on our Facebook pages. So the Center for Human Rights Facebook page, there's a live stream of the poll. Also, if you are listening to the webinar here and you have questions, you have issues to raise, please feel free to put them on the chat, and then we can take a look at the chat and we can refer to them as we go along. So without further ado, I will call upon Professor Frans Viljoen, who is the director of the Center for Human Rights, to just give us some welcoming remarks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Patience, and good day, everyone. I would like to add my words of warm welcome, I think, in this chilly day in Pretoria to you all. And I would like to thank, at the outset, our partners in this collaboration, the Thembekile Mandela Foundation, the Leading Like Mandela Institute with Dr. Azam, and also the United Nations, through UN Women, and particularly the South African multi-country office. Thank you for this fruitful collaboration. I also would like to really appreciate and welcome our esteemed panelists. I think esteemed is really the operative phrase here. We look forward to your contributions. I'm sure that your profiles really add stature to our event, and I'm very confident that your interventions will add much in terms of immediacy and urgency to our discussion. So, as Patience said, we thought it opportune to ask the question, what would it take? What would it take to turn the tide that we're all very familiar with, the tide of immeasurable slings and arrows that women face, particularly in South Africa. And it's an opportune time in this month. We all recall the shining and spirited example of those women marching to the Union buildings on 9 August 1956. I think in our ears still ring that famous song sung on that day, Watint Abafazi, Watint Imbogodo. If you strike a woman, you strike a rock. It is their determination that still, I think, to this day, inspire us in so many ways. But we also do this event under the auspices really of that other great icon and supporter of women's equality, Nelson Mandela Mandiba himself. I think one of his greatest legacies is this constitutional state in which we live, a constitutional state that has as one of its central pillars, obviously, the equal dignity of women and men in this country. So as we, on this day, on 5 August 2020, as we reflect, I think all of us would agree that we have come a long way in this constitutional state. Strong women hold important positions in very significant institutions. There is room for maneuver. But at the same time, we are all also very aware that there is still a shadow of the immeasurable blows that women still suffer to their bodies, their souls, their minds, their indignities, the inhumanities that they are suffering from on a daily basis in many ways. So that really inspired, in simple terms, the discussion today. We would want to pose that question in all the seriousness that it deserves. You know, what would it take to address this legacy, the legacy on the one hand of a constitutional state guaranteeing equality, equal dignity, but the reality of the unfulfilled promises. So I once again welcome you all, look forward to everyone's engagement, contributions by the panelists, but also from the floor, from everyone present. We thank you, and we look forward to a fruitful engagement and deliberation. Thank you. Patience, mute.
Apologies for that. So thank you very much, Professor Franz Villion, for the welcoming remarks. At this point, I want to call upon Dr. Azam, the director for the Leading Like Mandela Institute. So he is going to take us through the thoughts behind the Mandela Talk series and the objectives of this particular talk this morning. So Dr. Azam, the floor is yours.
Good morning to our esteemed panelists, and thank you to Honorable Chairperson, patients, and to all our viewers who are with us today. As we celebrate the power of women to transform the world, in this month where we pay tribute to over 20,000 women who took the stand for women around the world, for not only women in South Africa, but also for men and children, to uphold our rights and our dignity. So given that we are in this month that celebrates the power of women, we're also reflecting upon the legacy of the Nelson Mandela, the importance of continuing to lead as Nelson Mandela did. As Professor Francis mentioned, the constitution that we have in South Africa is part of his legacy. And the Leading Like Mandela program was a program with Nelson Mandela as the patron, which we then officially launched in partnership with the United Nations. We are pleased to have the resident coordinator of the United Nations South Africa, Excellency Ms. Thembekile Thomas, with us today, who has begun this walk of Leading Like Mandela with us towards improving the conditions of people around the world, supporting the development of Africa and our country, South Africa, through the driving the objectives of Agenda 2063, looking at how do we support leadership development in the attainment and the strive to attain the Sustainable Development Goals for 2030, and then the regional and local development plans. So the Leading Like Mandela program was established to support leadership within the continent and globally in the strive to improve the quality of lives of people and to uphold the legacy. Nelson Mandela being an archetypal leader, a leader who beckoned in an era of oneness, a leader whose focus was on peace, liberation, on democracy, and on human rights. So this is the work that we do in terms of Leading Like Mandela and Mandela Talks, as the Honorable, the Eminence Ms. Amina Mohammed, the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, when we launched the program in the Nelson Mandela Centenary, stated that this is a very important platform for dialogue and development in Africa and for support of the Sustainable Development Goals, but it's also an opportunity, she says, for each one of us to, as active citizens, to play our part, to play our role. And we have seen the power of women in terms of the role they have played. I'd like to read from the speech that Nelson Mandela made in 1996 on the 9th of August, when we were commemorating 40 years of this historic occasion. He said that today, when the women of South Africa converged on the Union buildings 40 years ago, from every corner of South Africa, they created one of the enduring landmarks of our country's history. They declared that women would insist on their role in making history. He spoke about the fact that we now, the challenge now for government, and this is the Mandela Talk, is about each of us playing a role in terms of dialogue, engagement, for us to share our views and also to contribute towards improving the world we live in. I would quote once again from Nelson Mandela's speech on that day, where he says that the challenge now for government, for women, and for men is to seize the opportunities provided by these new formal instruments. And he spoke about the Constitution and also the Commission on Gender Equality Act, which was just proclaimed the day before his speech. So he said, so that women can indeed play their rightful role in transforming our society, in generating sustained economic growth, in reconstruction and development. He went on further to say, it spoke about better access to healthcare, especially for women and young children, nutrition schemes for children, provision of clean water and electricity to communities that never had them, and land reform. These are just some of the first steps in our nation's attack on poverty, which weighs so heavily on women in particular. And so he spoke about the importance of us once again. And, we remember his words when he says that without women, and he went on to say that women have a very important role to play in improving the lives of our people. So the Mandela Talk today focuses on that specifically. And we are honored, as I said, to have esteemed panelists, people that are continuing the legacy. We have Ms. Zindzi Mandela, the first grandchild of Nelson Mandela, who's actively pursuing and continuing his legacy and is a strong activist, gender activist. We have Ms. Ntsiki Sisulu, who was carving out her own legacy as a leader in her own right and gender activist and representative within our government. She's also continuing the legacy of her grandmother, Ma Albertina Sisulu, and her grandfather, Walter Sisulu. And as we know, Ma Albertina Sisulu played a critical role, an important role in this march that we're commemorating today, when the women stood up to uphold our rights. We have, when I spoke, Nelson Mandela spoke about the commission, the Gender Commission, and the act that was passed. We have the Honorable Chairperson with us today, to go. When Nelson Mandela spoke about, he said that the role of the Gender Commission, along with the Office of the Status of Women in Presidency, are mechanisms for giving government departments an effective focus on gender issues. We are very pleased to have such esteemed panelists who are here with us to share what has been achieved thus far. How can we then take the great work that has been done forward? What still needs to be done, and how do we continue that long walk to freedom? As I said, we are honored to have Her Excellency, the Resident Coordinator of United Nations South Africa with us, as well as the representative for the UN Women for South Africa and the Multi-Country Office, Ms. Anne Kitiko-Shongwe, as well as Ms. Esther Nhlape from government, from the Office of the Presidency and Department of Women. So we are really in for an amazing dialogue today, and from the Mandela Talks and Leading Like Mandela, we thank you for participating and look forward to taking forward the great work that you're doing. And really, it's about celebrating the power of women to transform the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Azim. And thank you very much for, setting the stage for us for our discussions today, and just taking us through the spirit of the Mandela Talks. And I also just want to echo your words that today we are actually honored to have the building blocks of that are necessary for gender equality in South Africa, represented by the panelists that we have this morning. So if you are joining us for the webinar, if you've come in, there's a poll that is going on. You can see it on your screens, or you can view it from the chat room. Please do take part in the poll as we go along. But Dr. Azim, maybe before you leave the stage, maybe I could just kindly ask you to play for us the video recording that Her Excellency Miss Zindzi Mandela has provided for us. Miss Zindzi Mandela, as you know, is the CEO of the Thembekile Mandela Foundation. And as Dr. Azim has said, she's the oldest grandchild of Nelson Mandela, and in her own right, she is a social activist who has also dedicated her life to fighting for social justice. Miss Mandela unfortunately could not be with us today, but she did send a recording, and please, Dr. Zim, if you could play it for us.
Yes. Thank you, Chairperson. I will definitely play the video and maybe the recording, the voice recording by Miss Mandela Mandela. And in leading up to that, I'd like to also just say a few words. You know, Miss Mandela is renowned for taking the stand. You know, she's often regarded as a strong voice of the people. You know, and to be able to, one of the qualities of a great leader is to have the courage to stand for what you believe in, even if you are the only person standing up for that, as Nelson Mandela has taught us. So, and you know, your voice then echoes the sentiments of the people, because a leader represents the people they serve. And, you know, as we know, leaders are a reflection of the consciousness of the people they serve. So I will be playing that right now. And I would share as to set the tone as well in terms of how far have we come and what still needs to be achieved. You know, what are the challenges that people experience, given that she works with communities, rural communities? What happens on the ground? You know, how do we translate the excellent policies, the constitution, the frameworks and institutions that we have? How do we then deliver tangible results to the people who are on the ground? So without further ado, I will be playing her message, a voice recording.
This is Mandela Mandela, the CEO and founder of the Thembekile Mandela Foundation. I welcome you to the Mandela Talks of Leading Like Mandela and Happy Women's Month. Thank you to the panelists and everybody that has tuned in. We have seminars, we have focus groups, we make policies, but none of these policies give lasting solutions to the person on the ground, the woman that has to live a home with the clothes on their back because the husband is physically abusing him. So what I'm saying is that I hope that the people that have the budgets to unlock value in terms of real solutions, tangible solutions that you can touch and feel, that we can offer a woman that has to live at home. Currently in South Africa, there's very few halfway houses or shelters where women can go if they are abused. And if they get there, what help do they get? Is it equipped with psychologists, psychiatrists, people, case workers, social workers, people that can be able to assist this woman to be able to escape the bondage of abuse? More than that, what tools are we equipping these women with? So we have these focus groups, we talk about it during the 16 days of activism, and nothing happens. Until we can find solutions, and until we can find solutions of how to deal with issues involving women in terms of abuse. Because we are always looking at the symptom. Because I'm a nurse by profession, if you have to cure any disease, I've always said this to anyone that would listen. If you have to cure any disease, you have to go to the root cause of it. What is the root cause of gender-based violence? We never ever look at that. So I'm hoping that during this conversation that will happen today, those things will be touched on what is the root cause of gender-based violence. Because until we do, we'll forever have this. To the woman that will have to leave their home with the backs on their clothes with their children, our policies mean nothing to them because they have no shelter to run to. So let us come up with real lasting solutions that will talk to a person on the ground, be active people, active citizens, and get lasting solutions. This is 150 days, 15 days of activism with nothing tangible that would be able to say to a woman in a rural area, when you get abused, this is where you can go. I thank you.
Okay, so having heard the message from Ms. Thembekile Mandela, and reflecting, as our chair has mentioned, the time that we live in with COVID-19, this has brought about a greater focus on the inequalities and the disparities that exist in society, and the burden, the greater burden that women have to face. Hence the need for us to look at implementation. How do we then focus on implementing the great policies, living up to the ideals that are espoused within, and the principles espoused in our constitution. And as we know, it's women, as it's said and known, that if you educate a man, you educate an individual. When you educate a woman, you educate a nation. So what is the importance, what can women do in this time to step up as we create a new world? The world that we knew is undoing itself. We have seen that the systems of the economic systems, the systems of governance, our systems of education, healthcare, all of these systems are no longer proving to meet the needs of the people. And once again, just as the women who stood up for us, and made a stand for the rights of all, we are now looking at how do women stand up once again. Now, how are they currently, the efforts that women are doing, the sterling work and sterling efforts women are conducting in the various sectors, whether it's public sector, private sector, or civil society. How do you then now continue as we unite to create a better world for all? Thank you. Thank you, Patience.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zim, for playing that audio for us. Clearly, some very thought-provoking words from Ms. Thembekile Mandela, really just echoing the frustrations of South African women, that we need to move from policy to action. We need to move from rhetoric to action. So having said that, I want to now move on to Her Excellency Ms. Nados Bekele Thomas, who is the United Nations resident coordinator in South Africa. She's also going to just give us a goodwill message before we go into the panel discussion.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for having me at this wonderful August conversation. And thanks, Program Coordinator. Today, as we commemorate the Women's Month and celebrate women of South Africa and throw lights on our magnanimous leader, Nelson Mandela, and his legacy of value-based ethical leadership, allow me to just focus on two aspects. The first one is a reminder that women have always been the powerhouse, and we have power, and we need to cut the space and exercise it. I was born in a big family with 14 siblings, 10 of us from the same mother and father, and I was just in the middle. I grew up watching my mother managing this big family and providing for her children. A meticulously organized and hardworking person, a naturally gifted leader and manager. She paid particular attention to her girls and schooling. Luckily, all her girls ended up being successful professionals and have done better than her boys. She earned the authority over my father, who feared and respected her at the same time. There was nothing that could happen to in the family without her authorization. She was the disciplinary, the go-to for advice and guidance, the mediator and peacemaker in the community and family. She was the rock of the family and the community she served. She was extremely demanding of her children, very strict with family values and rules and regulations to be adhered to, with severe punishment for non-respect. As children, we always wished for a submissive, non-disciplinary, gentler mother, and were envious of our friend's uninvolved mother and a macho father. But as I grew older, I started admiring this remarkable woman. She featured as my reference for everything I did. She still remains my trusted advisor. Personally, I have been motivated by many women leaders, friends, family members, and those exemplary public figures we all know. But I want to confess today that my being has been shaped by my mother. I therefore believe that we are all gifted with power. In whatever position we have, we need to use this power to shape the being of the vision we have for the future generation. We can effect change in any role we play, from a housewife to a school captain to a captain of industry. It will ultimately be women who would make this world to be a better world. This should be a non-negotiable process as you and I navigate our positions of power. 2, women need to support each other. Sisterhood is a mighty energy that could light the world. When preparing this speech, I went again to my mother and asked my mother how she managed to raise 14 children, school them, feed them, and still remain to be impeccably dressed and a well-composed woman over time. She told me that she had her support from her women friends, her neighbors, and that they were there with her at all times, good and bad. This confirmed an interesting article which I came across recently, published by the World Economic Forum, on why it is more important to have women in leadership roles now more than ever. The answer: female leaders from across generations are working together to find new solutions to the world's biggest problems. From running a tech company to putting out bushfires, women are finding innovative solutions to their daily challenges. Ladies and sisters, we need to put our energies and intellectual power to our collective wisdom and use. We can surmount the difficulties we face if we are together. So my challenge to you is embracing a new social contract, a contract between and among us women, a new social contract between us as parents and our children, our daughters, but also our sons, between us and our men, and a new social contract that dismantles patriarchy, that demolishes violence against women, and a contract which fights fiercely inequality and discrimination. Ladies and gentlemen, on the 18th of July, just a month ago, the UN Secretary General, as you know, delivered the 18th annual Nelson Mandela Lecture. During his powerful address, he made references to the stark realities facing women today. The COVID-19 pandemic has laid those realities bare now more than ever. The economic fallout of the pandemic has affected the informal economy, most of whom are women. Gender inequality and discrimination continues to persist. High levels of violence against women, including femicide, more so during this global pandemic. Globally, women are still excluded from senior positions in governments and on corporate boards. Less than 1 in 10 world leaders is a woman. The Secretary General called for a new social contract, and I want to repeat, emphasize, and amplify that call today with you. This new social contract with the societies must enable young people to live in dignity and ensure women to have the same prospects and opportunities as men. We must do our best to ensure that all women have the best possible chance of rising to the top. Obstacles persist despite achievements and progress made. The COVID-19 has shown us that the face of poverty is a woman, and yet women make up a significant proportion of the economically active population. We need to change this narrative. Change is possible. It takes the will to see it through. Like my 93-year-old mother would say, we need to build resilience. We need to overcome the sense of powerlessness and be the change ourselves. We're individuals made in God's image, just like men. We acknowledge our differences from men, not as a reason for subjugation, but as a blessing to this world to provide unparalleled contribution to the family first, to the workplace next, and to the community at large. So, women, let's get together and be the change ourselves. Happy Women's Month.
Thank you very much, Ms. Thomas, for those words. A call to sisterhood, a call to arms. Women, let's get together and change the world in ways that we truly can. So thank you very much. Tiruna, could you help me by putting up the results of the poll before we go into our next segment, please? So before we started the webinar, we asked a few questions. The first one was, what drew you towards today's Mandela Talk on celebrating the power of women to transform the world? So the highest number of participants said that that they're actually inspired by Nelson Mandela and want to be part of an event that actually celebrates his legacy. And then the second largest group, of course, said that they are inspired by the talk being part of the event celebrating Women's Month. So I think our objectives are met here. We certainly are celebrating the legacy of Nelson Mandela and also celebrating the power of women to change the world. And so I believe that today we have the right kind of participants for our webinar. And then the second question that we asked. Tiruna, I think I might have closed that.
It says, which gender identity do you identify with best?
And the results, I can't see them either.
The results are, it's 28 people said that they identify as being cisgender women. So we have a large, almost 50% of our audience today is comprised of cisgender women.
Okay, and then there was a third question.
The third question asks, which is the most pressing issue currently affecting women in the South African region? And the majority of people said gender-based and intimate partner violence, closely followed by socioeconomic inequalities and the COVID-19 pandemic.
Okay, so thank you very much. So I'm glad that today we are going to be talking gender-based violence. We are also going to be talking economic justice. We are also going to be talking about social justice. And to quote the words of Ms. Thomas, women doing it ourselves. And we are also going to be talking partnerships. Who do we need as we transform the world as women? Who are the other partners that we want to have in this in this fight. So we are going into the second segment of our talk, which is really the panelists speaking to us. Now, looking at my time, I see that we need to really stick to time if we are going to have time for question and answers at the end, a discussion at the end rather. So I'm really kindly appealing to our panelists to please not go beyond the time that we have agreed. We have 5 panelists. We will hear all their presentations, and then we will allow for questions at the very end after they have all presented. If you have a question that you're afraid that you will forget, just write it down in the chat and then we can take it from there. We also apologize on behalf of Ms. Esther Maluleka. She will leave the meeting before it ends because she has another engagement elsewhere. If you've got a burning question for her, you put it in the chat as she speaks so that she can also respond to the question before she leaves. But otherwise, let us get into the business of the day. So I would want to invite our first speaker, who is Miss Nkituku Shongwe. She is a global thought leader and also the representative of UN Women Southern Africa multi-country office. She's going to be talking to us about partnerships, accountability, and responsibility. So over to you, Ms. Shongwe.
Thank you so much, Patience, and thank you for pronouncing my name right. Everybody says Gituku, you said Githuku, that's actually the right pronunciation. But thank you so much to the Thembekile Mandela Foundation for this wonderful opportunity to share on what would it take for us to change the journey of gender equality for our country. To the Center for Human Rights, I want to acknowledge you as well. And to Ndileka, even though she's not here, we want to congratulate you for this wonderful opportunity for you, Azam and team, for pulling this together. I want to acknowledge my big boss who is in the room, my big sister who is the epitome really of sisterhood. And her leadership for us as women in the UN is really incredible because she does exactly that. She ensures that she rallies behind us when we do well, when we're naughty, when we're out of order, making sure that we feel supported as women. And I think this is one of the biggest lessons for women's leadership. So this question that you ask about what would it actually take? I think it's a really important question because we have done a lot of the same for many, many, many years. And we're not seeing the shift as dramatically as we expect it to be. Apologies, I'm near the airport, so there's a flight. I might, if you give me 1 second, I'm going to switch off let me close my window. And hope that's a little bit better. But what I really want to talk about is the fact that, you know, it's 25 years since the Beijing Platform for Action, where we developed as the world's women a blueprint for gender equality. And we basically sat together and had these 12 areas that covered, you know, ending poverty, looking at education, looking at rights of women in all areas. And we're 25 years since then. And country after country last year prepared a report, this year rather, prepared a report of where their country is and where they are with progress. And overwhelmingly, the one issue that stood out above everything else was that the biggest area of work that still needs to be done is in terms of social norms and stereotypes. And I'll come back to that as an important contribution to this. But I do want to say that even as we look and we hear the repetition of so much data that is so negative about what we haven't done, actually in the last 25 years, there's some areas where we really have made progress. So 131 countries have removed discriminatory laws against women. In South Africa, we're at 88%. So we're just 12% for us to be able to close that gap. More girls in school than ever before, globally, an average of 12 years of education compared to 6.7 years ago, 30 years ago. More than 65 countries have reached gender parity in education enrollment. And what we know is that in tertiary enrollment in many countries, women now surpass men in school. The proportion of births attended by a skilled attendant has increased. In South Africa and in Africa, we are proudly amongst the top of the 11 countries in the world who have a gender equal cabinet. And I have to say that a lot of this work has happened because of the work of women. It has happened because women across the world have mobilized so significantly to push on this. But what I was raising was the fact that despite the data, and I can comb through data upon data about where we still are in terms of economic inequality, in terms of gender-based violence, I'll weave that as we speak. But I think we know the story. And if you're here in this room, you know the story that gender inequality is still easily 200 years away from being achieved at the current pace at which we're moving. And that we know that the COVID pandemic has actually, shown up even more how deeply entrenched these inequalities have been. And so whether it's the access to relief for food, for financing, for businesses, or the continuing and perpetual and sustained violence against women, we still have a lot of work to do. But this year is a pivotal year for us. COVID-19 has interrupted us, but we're not deterred. We continue. And it's important because with this 25 years since Beijing, this is the year that we're going to do a real checkpoint and say to ourselves, all right, we are 10 years from achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Goal 5 was a very clear goal about how to ensure that we end discrimination against women. It is in essence an expiry date for gender equality, right? Gender inequality. And so if we think about the next 10 years, what would it take for us to actually turn the tide? So I think the commemoration of these big milestones is important. So it's this 20 years. It's 20 years since Africa's Africa's Women's Decade. It's the beginning of 20 years for the African continent to move towards financial and economic inclusion. It's also UN Women's 10th birthday. We are the youngest of the UN agencies, and in and of itself shows where we are with gender equality, even as the United Nations. But we are proudly celebrating 10 years. And we took the decision that as part of this commemoration of the 10 years, of the 25 years since Beijing, that we're going to build new momentum, new partnerships, new movements, new energy to move towards actually turning the tide before the end of our 2030 agenda. And we formed what are called catalytic action coalitions. And these action coalitions are really the galvanization of multi-stakeholders who are governments, civil society, private sector, individuals coming together to say, what would it take for us to drive an agenda across 6 areas? We looked at the 12 areas of the Beijing Platform for Action and picked 6. And the 6 are gender-based violence, economic justice and rights. South Africa is one of the leading member states in this co-conveners of this one. Bodily autonomy and sexual and reproductive health and rights. Patients, you didn't see that even though we're 44% who are cisgender, we do have amongst us, I think about 6%, 3% I think who are transgender, and about 6% who are gender non-conforming, or at least I think that's how they were, and a few men who are also, we have some cisgender men and some who are not. So I think it's important that as we're talking about this in 2020, at the Beijing Platform for Action, we couldn't even have this conversation about your gender differently from man or woman. It wasn't even a conversation on the table. Now we can have the conversation. Feminist action for climate justice, technology and innovation for gender equality, and feminist movements and leadership. These are the 6 areas of these action coalitions that we're mobilizing around, and I think you'll be hearing a lot about them in the next months. But just to say that for me, the one big area, and I think women have done a lot of work. So the work of feminist movements is what has driven us to where we are today. And South Africa itself, if we look at this 1956 significance, and then go to 1993, 94, as this country was in negotiations, you will remember that CODESA stalled because of gender inequality, and that the women of South Africa refused to move forward with negotiations unless they were given an equal seat. So I think in some ways, we are at a place where we need to look back to what we learned from our movement as South Africa for gender, for racial equality, and for freedom in this country, and ask ourselves if indeed we are where we are today, what would it take for us to go back to the level of social mobilization that we did in the past? There's actually a book on social mobilization that the UN did 25 years ago, and it captures what are some of the big things that emerged during that time of social mobilization. And as we think of gender-based violence at a time like this, it really is incredible for us. We've done a study on bystanderism as UNDP and UN Women. And what we found was that the culture of bystanderism, where men and women stand and know, communities know who the perpetrators are. They know that X is an abuser, Y is abused. But still, we turn a blind eye because of the normalization of this in our society, for fear of retaliation or fear of being the one who, the whistleblower, right? So this is a deep culture that actually the social mobilization against apartheid, actually, that's what changed, that's what turned the tide. I don't know how many of us are old enough to remember, and I wasn't in this country, but I read up about it and I heard about it, about the street committees that were formed everywhere in this country. So that imagine if we set up street committees everywhere in South Africa, so that every single street has a church leader or a local police, local community organizer, a local women's organization that are standing together to make sure that no other woman is violated on my street. So you take back your street. Right now we sit and we say, what is the government doing? Where is government on this? Government has already done their part. They have laid the framework for it. And they still have a lot of work to do. But what are you doing? Where you sit, what are you doing? And this is where we have to get to a place where the entire South Africa is mobilized behind this. So that's my first thing, that I think what will really make the difference. That's the first one. The second one is the role of men. Women have mobilized these feminist movements forever. But the men are the biggest bystanders and yet the holders of the greatest power, both economic and political. But yet men are only in small numbers who stand up to be counted against violence or standing for gender equality. And so it is not about lip service as a leader, but it is about men who stand up to be counted in significant ways. Where we have seen change, even at a community level, we have seen, and we have partnerships with our He for She initiative, which I know is not popular amongst many of our women's feminist organizations. But it is an important agenda because it's an agenda that is calling men in solidarity. They're saying to men, you call out your neighbor. You call out the man that you know is violent. Because if I do, I could be in trouble. So how do we start mobilizing men for their action everywhere? And there are great examples already. And I see that, Siyakolisi is talking, Mampipi is talking. We've got John Kani and Silo Makagangube and others who are speaking out. But what we need is a mass mobilization where men everywhere take back the streets. Make it your business. The 6% of men who are in this room. France, Azam, take the street back. Take it back. We are all members of this society and we can do that. So I think that's it. The third point, and I'll end here, is about the investments and putting money where your mouth is. This country has 25 to 30% of the public procurement funds goes into the procurement of goods and services. And yet from the world, across the world, barely 1% of that goes towards women. In South Africa, that varies from year to year between 7 and 10%. And so here we are sitting in a place where in this middle of this COVID, PPE is a massive economy right now, but barely 1% of women are accessing that opportunity. If institutions made it their business, and I mean institutions everywhere, and I say this, the Center for Human Rights, the Nelson Mandela, the Thembekile Mandela Foundation, the United Nations, you know, the Department of Women, all of us who are here in this room as institutions, are you buying from women businesses? Are you making it your business to make sure that you translate the leadership that you see of women into the spend? Because if your money, your bottom line doesn't show, then we're not changing the game. And yet we know from a famous McKinsey study that if women had equal opportunity to men, the world would grow by 28%. $28 trillion is what is put on the table. So if in this country, if every spaza shop owner woman, if every woman who runs an ECD center, if every woman who is able to supply, even if it's a pen or a paper or a toilet paper, had the opportunity to do this, we would change the game for this country, because she would ensure that her family is fed. She would ensure that her community is serviced. And so we really need to flip it. And for me, if we want to change the game, and what would it take? It's for institutions to put their money where their mouth is, but also to make the decision that at their institution, gender equality is their business, and gender violence will not happen under their watch at any point in their leadership. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Shongwe. Mobilizing, engaging men, and putting our money where our mouth is are some of the things that should take us forward. Without further ado, I want to ask Ms. Esther Maluleka, who is the Chief Director for Governance, Transformation, Justice and Security in the Department of Women in the Presidency, to speak to us about gender-based violence. How far have we come, and what else needs to be done? Ms. Maluleka, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and good morning. And I just want to acknowledge the esteemed panelists in the room and all the participants. And thank you very much for inviting me to come and share my thoughts around this subject. It was very difficult for me, you know, to find an angle at which I need to share how we got here in terms of challenging the pandemic, or dealing with the pandemic that we are currently experiencing, particularly gender-based violence. My sharing of thoughts, I will struggle between what Ms. N and Ms. Bekele from the UN have spoken about around partnerships and women really taking the opportunity to continue the struggle, because this would not be the first time that women take the struggle into their hands and try and ensure that there is change. I thought my approach would just be about sharing, looking at the women's movement, and I will not get into deep into that. Look at the phases that the women's movement has gone through, but also to see how it has helped us arrive at the point that we are in terms of developing the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence. I draw from the experience that I have over 2 decades of working in this sector, and the challenges that we've met throughout the journey in terms of ensuring that a government responds to this scourge in the manner that they have recently, and just acknowledging the fact that African countries, and South Africa included, has undergone major socio-economic and political restructuring and transformation since the advent of post-colonial rule. Whilst noting the achievements made by women's movement post-liberation, literature has shown us, I think there's a body of research that actually acknowledge the legacy of post-colonial Africa and the importance, the impact of hegemonic systems and imperialism and globalization on the African feminist movement. I think context is very important when considering this issue, especially gender-based violence. And the fact that post-colonial rule, feminists have struggled to actually redefine their identity, which actually limits their development. And we know, especially in South Africa, that women won political battle for independence from the colonial masters, working side by side with their male counterparts. However, patriarchy remains deeply entrenched, and intersectionality of gender, race, and class systems remain a serious knee on the neck of independent Africa. So we still are, our country is still characterized by socio-economic, political, and health challenges that negatively impact on the quality of life of majority of the population, especially women and children. In looking at this journey, one can see three emerging themes in terms of the journey that the women's movement has traveled. The first one is lack of conceptual clarity in terms of how we want to take the struggle forward and how we want to make sure that women's power change the world. The second one is the weak institutional mechanisms that we have actually established to assist us to drive the agenda of gender equality and women's empowerment. And lastly, and this is the argument that I will be positing in terms of establishment of direct relationship with the state and reconstructing and repositioning women's citizenship. So in terms of the lack of conceptual clarity, we note that the women's movement post-colonialism resulted in preoccupation and with anti-colonial and anti-imperialist project. And this has resulted in politically and ideologically diverse of thinking and approaches to this point of serious contestation. The approach that we adopted in terms of driving the empowerment of women and the women's equality agenda is basically adopting largely the human rights approach. And I know that there are there's different conceptualizations in terms of how we can drive this agenda, but largely, and if you look, especially in South Africa, there's emphasis on the human rights approach, which, it's criticized as having weakened the women's movement. And it's seen as a neoliberal paradigm, which has diluted actually the language in the discourse and in policy documents. For instance, we use terms like gender-based, concepts like gender mainstreaming, gender equality rather than women's freedoms or feminist liberation. So this kind of approach in organizing ourselves is seen as, maintaining this, assisting in maintaining the status quo and basically rocking the boat, and instead of actually challenging it. When it comes to the institutional mechanisms, we've seen that, especially, and I'm talking from a government perspective. For instance, if you look at the national women's machineries, its effectiveness has degenerated, and because of a number of reasons. One is unclear mandates, lack of adequate resources, whether you're talking human resources or funding. We also don't have sufficient, dedicated training to build capacity, especially of bureaucrats that are supposed to be driving this agenda within government. So there's a lack of, largely, for instance, technical skills in terms of really assisting and adding value to gender responsive planning, budgeting, monitoring, and evaluation. And we also are confronted with the challenge of having insufficient data, especially around gender-based violence, to assist us to address this issue. So these are some of, I just highlighted just a few of the current challenges that we are having. But going back to the journey around responding to gender-based violence in the country, and I made reference to the issue of human rights approach. I think since 1990, 1946, the Constitution has clearly given the country, government, the mandate to drive this agenda of women's empowerment. Having built from the history of the women's movement, the 1965 march, the involvement of women in terms of engaging in terms of women's empowerment on a number of issues and policy development and framing of legislation to ensure that women are able to claim their rightful place in society, and that we change and transform their lives in a very substantive manner. But when you look at gender-based violence, and I'm making this point to demonstrate that this responsibility, because it's enshrined in the Constitution. A lot of work was left to government to actually drive this agenda for a number of years. I recall personally when because I was a gender focal person working in the Department of Health. And there was a number of us gender focal persons in different departments during those early days. And we came into an institution that hardly had, for instance, policies and frameworks that could actually guide this agenda. And one of which was a lack of clear policy on how we address the issue of gender-based violence. And we gathered together because we had the, as activists, the burning desire to ensure that our voices are heard in government to actually address this issue. And I think we were led at that time by the late Minister of Health, Ms. Mantoshabala Msimang, who actually popularized the 16 days of no violence against women. But clearly, a lot of work that was done was with an unfunded mandate, and that situation remains up to this day. So we gathered together as a few officials and established what we called the interdepartmental management team specifically focused on addressing the scourge of gender-based violence. I can tell you it was a huge struggle because, first of all, this team's work was not institutionalized. So it was very difficult to lobby and push for instance, allocation of resources, changing of mindsets, considering that government is still a very highly patriarchal institution. So, and may I say that this group was formed by passionate women, about 7 or 8 women within government to actually push the agenda. We ended up having managed to develop the 365 National Action Plan that we mostly speak about.
Ms. Maluleka, I also would want to ask you to wrap up.
Yes, yes, I'm getting there. But I think I was just trying to demonstrate that this journey dates back 2 decades ago in terms of getting us to the national strike. But what's the point that is different from what was done then and now is the push that came from women's movements. And of note is the march that was people made reference to earlier on to the union buildings last year on the 2018 on the 1st of August. That was a game changer because it assisted us to begin to engage meaningfully with civil society. So I'm arguing that for women to bring change, we need to engage government constantly. We need to push, to continue to make our voices heard, especially civil society. But ultimately, we need to consistently engage government institutions because that was the point of weakness, where we were seeing each other more as enemies rather than coming together. And so our relationship does not necessarily, this is the point I'm making, be antagonist. We always need to sit together, and this is what helped us manage to bring about, through the interim steering committee, the National Strategic Plan. So I believe as women, this is possible. And if you look at that team, it was predominantly constituted by women and who worked hard without getting any remuneration to actually accept for government officials, of course, but I'm talking about civil society that volunteered their skills, and I'm not necessarily promoting that. I think women's labor should be valued, but we got where we are because we found each other, and managed eventually to have the strategic plan. And lastly, the challenge that we are faced now is to ensure that this strategic plan becomes a lived document policy. And I believe that this is possible. We should just continue to enhance and build on these relationships that started. And I think I'll pause there. But I think women also require largely, especially in government, a lot of mentoring and coaching and ensuring that they push the agenda of gender response in planning and budgeting, and that they constantly should challenge the patriarchal nature and the culture of patriarchy in institutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Maluleka, for really taking us through issues around the need for conceptual clarity, the need to strengthen the institutions that have a mandate to ensure gender equality in the country, and also really touching on this relationship between civil society and government to work together to ensure that there is change for women. I want to now move on to Honorable Commissioner of the Commission for Gender Equality, Ms. Tamara Maturela. She is going to be talking to us about legislative frameworks, what's new, what needs to be reviewed or to be repealed. And as she's talking to us about that, I see that in the chat we have a question around that South Africa has progressive laws that empower women, but yet we are still facing the same challenges we faced post-Beijing. Shouldn't we be changing our strategy to demand compliance and monitoring? Maybe, if possible, you could also touch on that. So we have a legislative framework that is good. What about monitoring compliance?
This is a productive contribution. I think there was
Ms. Maluleka, I'll also ask you to mute your microphone.
Thank you very much, Patience. Thank you, and thank you for the question that was posed. I'll do my best to reflect on it. Thank you, Patience, and let me acknowledge the esteemed panelists and appreciate the invite, the participants that are here. We really appreciate this invite as the Commission for Gender Equality to come and share our insights from a legislative perspective. And I just want to thank the institutions, the 3 institutions that have jointly organized this session: Leading Like Mandela Institute, the Center for Human Rights Center at the UP, which I previously worked closely with in my previous life, and the Thembekile Mandela Foundation. Thank you so much for organizing this important session. Yes, I represent an institution which is an independent statutory institution that was established to support democracy in accordance to Chapter 9 of our Constitution. And I think our mandate, our broader mandate, and I know that my sister Esther Maluleke was talking about the mandates, and ours is quite broad in accordance to the, if you look at Section 187 of the Constitution and the CGE Act that the earlier doctor described very well earlier. So we have an Act 39 of 1996 that gives us a mandate to promote respect for gender equality in South Africa. And we do this through quite a number of things. So we monitor policies, we evaluate those policies, we do research, we do public education, and we do effective, monitoring and litigation when necessary. And we really investigate many gender-related or gender discrimination-related complaints that we receive at the Commission. So I think just to get into the legislations that we need to just look at this morning or this afternoon, I just want to say that perhaps it's good to really look at processes, looking back, so that we are able to look forward. So whilst we all know that human rights in South Africa are protected under the Constitution, there are still widespread violations of those fundamental human rights on the basis of sex, on the basis of gender, on the basis of pregnancy, marital status, sexual orientation, ethnic and social origin. So these are some of the things that we, on a daily basis, see that there is violations. And on the second hand, we see that there are glaring instances of discrimination, marginalization, and exclusions of gender identity issues from various legislative bills. We have looked at policies that are excluding. We have looked at practices in South Africa, and really there are still huge exclusions based on gender, based on orientation, and based quite on a number of things. And which is why we thought that perhaps this afternoon we need to just come and share some of the legislative bills, policies, practices, and perhaps together identify gaps that we still need to really look at, evaluate, and work, in terms of making sure that these are reviewed, these are looked at, and together we develop those policies that are gender responsive, that are not gender blind, so that at least it can take the process forward. I think first and foremost, we have the Constitution, which is the supreme law. And this Constitution basically broadly provides a guiding framework or a backbone upon which other laws, the other laws should rest actually on the Constitution, meaning that if there is any law that is not aligned to the Constitution, we consider that law invalid, and we dare say that it's illegal. And this is the work that the CGA, the Commission, has been doing over the past 2 decades in terms of making sure that there is alignment with the Constitution. And if you look at the Constitution, Act 108 of 1996, it further lays a foundation for protection of women's rights. Under Chapter 2, it talks about the Equality Clause that should actually provide a legal framework in which gender equality is protected. And it forbids any other kind of discrimination against anyone on the basis of gender. And it further lays the basis for the repealing of many pieces of discriminatory policies and legislations for the introduction of progressive rights-based legislations that are mindful of gender realities. And I think the question that was posed earlier says that, yes, we do have a number of policies, progressive policies, including the Constitution in South Africa. However, I think implementation of those policies has been problematic and challenging for many institutions in South Africa. And yes, and I agree with you that we perhaps need a strategy to actually make sure that we monitor compliance. And this is the kind of work that Gender Equality or Gender Commission has been doing. And I will actually reflect back on that a bit later. I think the Constitution further actually brings an angle that was saying that if you look at how it was established, and I know that my sister Anne Githuku Shongwe was talking to this establishment of the Constitution in South Africa, actually took many forms of social mobilization. What becomes more interesting is that the conversation that was developed and by those women that mobilized themselves, and they consulted in terms of CODESA. We had women like Mama Albertina Sisulu, Mama Winnie Madikizela Mandela, and many other women's activists who actually came together to say that perhaps before the finalization of the Constitution, let's look at what it is there for us. And let's make sure that we also bring elements of our, perhaps previous policies that we have developed. And one of these policies was, amongst others, the women's, policies that were there that were developed from 1955. And these policies were beginning to actually shape the way the Constitution was developed in South Africa. And some of those really were actually speaking to issues of leadership, game changer, how women can actually influence and develop constitutions and pieces of legislation like the Domestic Violence Act, borrowing from the previous, national women's coalitions and groups that began to develop previous pieces of frameworks that actually looked at women empowerment, looked at gender equality in South Africa. And I think some of those is nothing else but the 1955 Charter, Women's Charter, which in its own accord begins to influence the development of gender policies through the gender lens, and making sure that it actually begins to claim a women's constitutionality and legal rights within the Constitution in South Africa. And I must say that over the past 2 decades, the Commission for Gender Equality has been working hard in terms of monitoring compliance, looking at the evaluation of legislations. And I think we've been working with quite a number of government departments, civil society organizations, private sector in terms of making sure that they comply with some of the policies. And I must also mention that looking into some of the government departments, some of those policies were not in existence. So we had to start from the beginning just to make sure that we work together in terms of developing in the public sector, in the private sector, in institutions of higher learning, gender transformative policies, look at procurement, how procurements are done. And we have looked at civil society organizations in terms of how they look at state of shelters, something that was actually mentioned by Ms. Mandela earlier in terms of making sure that women can access shelters, and these shelters can actually provide a full package to women who actually run away from gender-based violence situations at home. And I think we are quite enough to be convinced that the Constitution is there. We have a number of legislations and policies that are looking at the human dignity, the human rights, and we are saying, how do we actually move forward together in terms of making sure that at this time, we can actually become one of those game changers, like the women who actually get into social mobilization and made sure that some of the policies were influenced at the time. I think we need to make sure that in this particular country, we develop together, and in fact, we reflect first on the progress that South Africa has made in terms of developing policies, developing legislations, but also implementing some of those legislations, and begin to look at the efforts that we can collectively make in terms of making sure that we address gender equality or gender inequality, gender-based violence, and enhance gender equality through the development, the review, the repealing of various laws, various policies, various bills, such as the Employment Equity Act, the PEPUDA, the BBEE Acts, and quite a number of those acts and policies that we are beginning to develop in our own institutions, such as the gender policies, the sexual harassment policies in the workplace, so that all of these things speak to how we can actually change the way we do things in our own situations, be it in higher institutions of higher learning or be it in government departments. We need to actually struggle to look at how we can look at changing these laws and policies for our own benefit. And I think based on the work that the Commission has done in terms of investigating, calling people to public hearings, we need to make sure that we all struggle to implement some of the recommendations that the existing policies are making and the investigations that the Chapter 9 institutions collectively are making in South Africa, and really begin to review and identify gaps that are there and decide if there are new legislative policies that are necessary and are looked at as solutions given to actually address the state of gender inequality, gender-based violence and femicide in South Africa. And I'm glad that Ms. Maluleke spoke about the strategic plan, the national strategic plan. And within that plan, I think there is a proposal that we need to review the Domestic Violence Act, the Sexual Offences and Amendment Act. Those are some of the acts that we will actually be prioritizing from this month onwards in terms of reviewing some of those acts, not working alone, but also working with all of you that are actually participating and those that are not participating in this webinar. And if you look broadly, the CEDAW requires us to actually address issues of gender patriarchy, and these are some of the things that we are currently looking at. We are looking at the bills that we have developed, like the Wedger bills, and all of these in their various forms are actually saying that we need to consider some of these bills as the vehicles that we can use to address gender inequality, gender-based violence towards really achieving true emancipation of women in South Africa. And this we cannot do alone. We need partnerships. We need practical application of the policies, of the practices and principles that promote human as well as women's rights in South Africa. And CGE has been making some of those recommendations to improve our policies, to improve our systems, and implement those policies, because policies are actually gathering dust on the shelves, and those policies are not actually implemented by various government departments and private sector companies. We need to translate those policies into practice.
Commissioner,
we need to have, as I wrap up, as I conclude, I want to say that we all need to recognize that private, public sector, as well as NGO sector and actors in our society have a duty to respect and promote human rights, promote women's rights towards driving change and leadership that will actually say that at this time we are emulating those leaders like Masisulu, who marched to the Union building, and the Masisulus who were negotiating at the Codesa at that time. And then lastly, we need to create an open, transparent institutions that promote gender transformation, diversity, and equality outcomes insofar as policies and in laws, as well as in practices. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, and thank you very much for responding to the question around the implementation of the laws and policies that we already have. So you touched on the need to reflect on our implementation of legislation, whether there's a need for us to review, repeal, and even enact new laws to ensure that gender equality becomes a reality in South Africa. And of course, the need for open and transparent institutions. I'm quickly moving on to Mr. Greg Knott. So he is the director of the Norton Rose Fulbright and the former vice president of the National Association of Democratic Lawyers. He is going to be talking about the running battle, Caster Semenya's courageous fight, and there's a courageous fight for women and human rights. And as he does that, he's going to be touching on issues of dignity, human dignity and social justice.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much through you to the Foundation for the very kind invitation to share some of my thinking today, and to Professor Frans Viljoen of the University of Pretoria Human Rights, as well as Dr. Azam, very much. And also, of course, to all the prestigious participants who are participating today from all across the continent and the world. So thank you very, very much, Madam Chairperson. I've entitled my presentation today, A Running Battle, Caster Semenya and Her Courageous Fight. I really loved the start of Anne earlier, where she called upon everybody, including men, to stand up together and ask the question, what would it take? And if one looks at Caster, you see what would it actually take in terms of an individual, not only a collective, but as an individual person to take on institutions for gender equality, and as you said it correctly, human dignity. It's been my privilege to represent Caster for the last 10 years, and I'm not suggesting her running battle has not only been for 10 years. I think her running battle started right from the word go, in the sense of access to the ability to participate in her sport from both an economic and a financial perspective. But the running battle that I speak to is the running battle that she's had with the IAAF, the International Athletics Association, where she's had to fight for her very being as a person and in terms of her own dignity. In 2009, Caster was, and let me just also just say that whilst I'm a lawyer, I don't want to bore people with the legalities of the battle either. This is really a heartfelt human story of a person who has brought gender equality to the front, to the fore, and human dignity to the fore. We have a team of 10 lawyers right around the world who act on her behalf, and who have managed to gather resources from various quarters So I don't pronounce to be the expert in any given aspect of the case, other than to say that I'm close to Custer for the last decade. But in 2009, Custer was banned from competing and was first vilified by the Australian, then the world press, as to what Custer in fact was supposed to be. Was she a man or a woman? It was humiliating, it was stigmatizing, and it was a segregation of her natural and her physical attributes brought upon by the case. But 11 months of negotiation and discussion with the IAAF brought us to the point where Custer again in 2010 could actually run. And she did, and win she did for the next 5 years, where Dutan Chand, a athlete in India, won an arbitration case, giving a reprieve for Custer and others in her category to be able to run. But in 2018, the IAAF introduced new rules requiring women who have naturally high testosterone to either not compete or take suppressant or have surgery. So for the first time in world athletic history, you had people who wanted to compete having to have suppressants or have invasive surgery. Sorry, I'm just trying to move this along. Central to the dispute in Custer's fight is to be recognized as the woman that she is and actually was raised to be. Don't you recognize that these are absolutely wonderful photographs of Custer in her smiling, congenial her manner? And may I just say, this is the Custer that I know. Despite all that is thrown against her, all that she's had to succumb and overcome, she remains smiling, courageous, and strong. Her fight to have her dignity respected and to be fairly treated and equally treated is a fight which, as we've seen, has held the world's attention. At one press conference, there were over 100 journalists interested in Custer and her ability to take on the IAAF. It really is, in essence, a fight of a Black woman repeatedly having to make her name in international sports. And may I just mention here that to get to the Court of Arbitration is something else. One looks at remedies in terms of, well, one would think this is very easy. One goes along and has the fight and either wins or loses the fight. But to actually get into the court case itself costs an absolute fortune. You need a battery of lawyers, and you need to go and find yourself in probably one of the most expensive cities in Europe to be able to fight and for your case to be heard. I think that in itself is iniquitous, it's unequal, and it's unfair. It happens to be Lausanne in Europe, where the Court of Arbitration sits, and it is, as I say, unfair that it does sit there. If one looks at the fight of Custer, it's not only the fight of Custer, but it's the fight of North, South, rich, poor, Black, white. Sorry, on the 21st of March, which is Human Rights Day in South Africa, a resolution was adopted, which is the elimination of discrimination against women and girls in sport. It was submitted and championed, I'm pleased to say, by the South African Permanent Mission to the United Nations in Geneva. And it expresses concern that regulations, rules, and practices that require women and girl athletes with differences of sex development, androgen sensitivity, and levels of testosterone to medically reduce their blood testosterone levels may contravene international human rights norms and standards. Whilst it's not binding, we do hope that it's a step in the right direction. Now, to answer what Anne raised right in the very beginning, what does it need to get us, what does it take for us to get going? Well, it takes a concerted effort. It needs a collaborative effort. Anne also mentioned earlier, and I've noted it down, that we can't run alone. In the instance of Custer, whilst people think that Custer is surrounded by many people, Custer does in fact run alone. She's been supported by the University of Pretoria, may I say. She's been supported by a battery of lawyers who have had her back for the last 10 years. But by and large, she does need the collaborative effort of everybody. She cannot, this is not a fight that just happened just recently in the Court of Arbitration. This is a fight that's been going on for a decade, and for many parts of that decade, Custer actually has run alone. So for all the women out there who fight the gender battle, who fight for rights, who fight for equality, we cannot fight alone. There's got to be a collaborative effort, one with one voice. And I think that is the message that Custer gives the sports field, but beyond the sports field, she gives the global stage the voice to say, collaborate, fight, and fight again. Custer has an amazing, amazing ability to be able to fight, and that fight needs to be supported by others. In terms of support financially, that too, people think that money just comes along and it can be helped and given. No, that is not the case. It needs to be supported. Custer and people like Custer need the support of deep pockets, and those deep pockets can only be reached upon by those who say, well, this is a particular fight that we've got to fight. We want to support it. So we need all the support in the world that we can get, not only for Custer's case, but for people like Custer and women like Custer. Thank you very much. We now await the judgment of the Swiss Supreme Court of Appeal in the appeal against a decision by the Court of the Arbitration of Sport. Again, this Supreme Court of Appeal sits in Switzerland, one of the wealthiest and richest countries in the world. We are working together, I'm pleased to say, with the South African Human Rights Commission and the South African Commission for Gender Equality, whose chairperson we've just heard so eloquently fight and articulate her views. If needs be, we'll take the fight through to other European forums, but we cannot stand by and watch a woman be stripped on the world stage by people who are disconnected from the reality of today's society. We live in a very, very different world. We appreciate how even in this decade that this fight has been taken and society has been developed. The people are behind Custer. The people are behind women like Custer, and the people are behind the women who fight every day for equality and for justice. Madam Chairperson, thank you for the opportunity for me to advocate Custer's case today in line of a general women's fight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think you speak beyond the issue of Custer, even though you speak through the voice and the violation and the stripping of the dignity of Custer, but you speak to the violation of many, many marginalized women groups and how as a movement we need to pay attention to those that are falling on the margins. And I like what you said. You said collaborate, fight and fight again. So our last speaker is Nontsikelelo Sisulu. Ms. Sisulu is a gender activist and a clinical psychologist. She is going to be speaking to us on issues of economic empowerment versus economic justice, the new struggle for women. Ms. Sisulu, please, if you can take the floor.
Thank you very much. Let me acknowledge the host, Lead Like Mandela, Dr. Azim, the Center for Human Rights, the University of Pretoria, Thembekile Mandela Foundation, and of course, UN and the CGE, government officials and our fellow panelists, good afternoon. The question is, what will it take to transform our country? A simple response would be economic justice for women and would end right there. However, let me reflect briefly on what it took for us to have a free and democratic South Africa. It took untold victory, untold conviction, bravery, and sacrifice. It took gunning down of children. It took separation of families. It took life imprisonment. It took death by hanging, just to list a few. Surely, what it will take for us to achieve economic transformation in South Africa parallels from what it has taken for us to be here today. Today, in the midst of COVID-19, we remember that in the life and times of the women of 1956, they also faced the deadly influenza. What we remember and celebrate most is that the women always have a strategy, an implementation plan, and actually execute their strategy. This is evidenced by their 1954 Women's Charter, in which, amongst other things, they simply said, we do not seek to create a society different from our men. That speaks to the inequality that we continue to face today and the unemployment that we're facing today. Our economy is buckling at the knees. And if it does buckle all the way to the ground, the people who will be crushed will be the women, without a doubt. It is the collective approach of an organized formation of the women of 1956 that left the apartheid government and all the men in South Africa overwhelmed and truly shocked at the successful and powerful watershed march of 64 years ago that we even remember today. But what we celebrate most and are inspired by is their spirit of no limit and no surrender. This is what we will require in the new struggle for economic justice for women. A further example of collectivism and organized formations, and I'd like to quote a quote from 1986, and it links to something that you said, which Albertina Sisulu said. She said, it is the women of this, women are the people who are going to relieve us from this oppression and depression. The rent boycott that is happening in Soweto now is alive because of the women. It is the women who are in the streets and on street committees educating the people to stand up and protect each other. What then will it take? Collective movement with a common vision, a common goal, a plan and an implementation plan that we as women can execute towards justice. Justice in ensuring that we no longer have a wage gap, that men do not earn more than we do for the same work. We've tried to use economic empowerment, but I think justice carries more weight because a great injustice has been created and burdened on us as women. What will it take? It will take economic inclusion of women in all sectors of society and at every single level. Right now, women are at the bottom, and if they ever get to senior management, it's certainly only at the entry level and not very much at the top. What will it take? Every sector to make sure that they employ women. After all, we are the majority, and we're certainly not apologetic about that. What will it take? We need to remove access to funding, access the barriers that are there, the funding for women who want to start businesses and funding for women who actually want to grow their businesses. We are also quite pleased that there was an open letter to the president to say, Mr. President, we can't breathe because of the economic justice. Therein, a movement has started. We then need to say, can we collectively rally around these women who actually started a movement? But as I conclude, I want to remember again what Albertina Sisulu said, and I will end perhaps with a question or two. She said, we are each required to walk our own road and then stop, assess what we have learned and share it with others. It is only in this way that the next generation can learn from those who have walked before them. We can do no more than tell our story. Then it is up to them to make of it what they will. The questions that are remaining for us is, what have we learned? What story will we tell about the economic justice struggle of South Africa today? And what lessons really will we leave if the economic justice persists? We are still looking for a non-sexist, non-violent, and gender equal society. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I truly appreciate that you spoke within the time. I'm sure all of us can note that we are really, really behind time, and some of our speakers have other engagements, and so they have to leave at 1 o'clock. Thank you. So we need to move from economic empowerment to economic justice, and we need to recognize that an injustice has occurred. And so with that, I want to just give a few minutes for questions before I ask our panelists to conclude, given the time that we have. I also see that on the screen, the second poll has gone up. Please, again, we are kindly asking you to answer the questions on the poll as we go along, as we continue with the program. Please scroll down so that you answer all the questions on the poll. Thank you very much. I am just going to the chat now to see if there are any questions for our panelists. I think the question on the implementation of laws has been sufficiently answered by Honorable Matubela. But we also have a question from Dixon, and Dixon is asking, can the Maputo Protocol be used as a tool for change by assisting women to access gender inequality, social, economic, and political empowerment? I would think that that question would probably have been answered by the Ministry of Women, and Esther is no longer on the call. She had excused herself beforehand. I am just trying to see if we have any other questions. I see a lot of comments. I also see a lot of affirmations around women and the great work that they have been doing to ensure economic empowerment, as well as the need for partnerships. So this speaks to what our presenters have been saying. There's also a question on how the government, if the government has taken any action with aligning disability and women in policies and structural programs. This combination is often not aligned despite disability immobilizing gender. Again, I imagine that this question would have gone to the Ministry of Women. So maybe just to speak on the issue of the Maputo Protocol and say, as indicated by the Honorable Chairperson of the Commission, that there's need for us to reflect as a country around the treaties that we have signed and see whether our laws actually domesticate these treaties so that women can live the lives that are envisaged by the treaties. So the Maputo Protocol, just like the UN CEDAW, is a very important instrument for the protection of the rights of women on the African continent. And so, yes, the short answer is yes, it is a useful tool, and the work needs to be done to ensure that it is domesticated in our own jurisdiction. If you have a question, you can raise up your hand if you haven't put it in the chat, so that our remaining speakers can respond to the questions. And at this point, I do not see any hands. Okay, I do not see any hands. And I also think that we have gone way beyond our time. So I am going to ask Tiruna if you have the results of the poll. Maybe you want to show them already. Okay. So in our final poll, we were asking, how do you see women as leaders in striving to address these inequalities and to give birth to a world with human dignity, peace, freedom, and equality? And we ask that you choose one of the responses below. So most of us see women experience structural barriers preventing them from taking up positions of leadership. So a lot of barriers to actual women's participation in leadership positions, something that was touched on by Ms. Shongwe, Ms. Maluleka, and Ms. Sisulu as well. And then, of course, the other issue is that women are able to lead with ease and support from their male colleagues. So again, we need all stakeholders to be involved. We need to move away from male bystanderism. These are some of the conversations that we had today. And then the next question related to how can we strive towards achieving gender equality in our society? Choose all that apply. So I am failing to scroll down on my own computer here to see the answers. I can see that 80% talked about implementation of educational campaigns addressing gender inequality and the impact on women. But beyond that, I can't see what else is there. Tiruna, can you assist me?
Yes, can I read the rest out for you?
Yes, please.
Okay, so 52% said that focusing on equal representation for women in positions of leadership. 40% voted for enforcing stricter penalties for perpetrators of gender-based and intimate partner violence. 36% said prioritizing the efficiency of service delivery for sexual and reproductive health services for women. And 52% said keeping girls in school by providing mentorship programs from women who are community leaders. And 20% said keeping girls in school by providing menstrual products and making consent-based sex education programs available. And 64% said implementing policies to expedite the achievement of Sustainable Development Goal 5, which concerns gender equality. And the majority went for 84% towards ensuring women's full and effective participation and equal opportunities for leadership at all levels of decision-making in political, economic, and public life.
And those were the two questions.
Yes.
Okay. So thank you very much. I would want to give our panelists 30 seconds to say any concluding remarks that they may have. I note that Ms. Esther Maluleka has left. I also note that Ms. N. Shongwe has left. So I am going to ask Honorable Commissioner Matsubela if you want to say any concluding remarks.
Thank you very much, Patience. I think for me, what is quite key and important at this point is that we need those collaborative efforts. And just to reiterate my colleague Greg, to stand together to fight for the fight that CASTA is fighting alone. I think that's the first thing for me and a priority for the months to come, to work closely with the partners and fight for the minority groups, including CASTA Semenya. So let's fight those fights together. But what is key and important is that in South Africa, I think it's time for all of us to reflect, look back at what we have done best, and take the models that seem to have worked for all of us in terms of achieving gender equality, whether in parliament, by representation, in provincial legislations. But let's stand together, take those lessons that we have done, models that we have done best, and lessons that we have learned forward in terms of addressing gender-based violence, femicide, as well as social injustices in South Africa. I thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Gregory Knott.
I think the fight for dignity is so important, and I call upon all participants and all of us to collaborate in that fight for human dignity. At the end of the day, that will be the fight for fundamental human rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Nontsikelelo Sisulu.
The time to fight for economic justice is now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much. I am sure that you all agree that today we had such a wealth of knowledge presented to us, and we had such great panelists. I think the conversations were too short. I unfortunately had to restrict them on time, but I think there's a lot of take-homes for all of us. I think we really have started to think about what is it that we can do going forward. And I think I liked what Ms. Sisulu said at the end when she quoted Albertina Sisulu, and she said that the first starting point is that we need to reflect, to stop and reflect on what we have done already. And I think that also came out in Ms. Maluleka's conversation, that we need to look back and see what we have done, and then look at what it is that we need to do going forward. And I think most of our panelists talked about the need to collaborate, the need to strengthen institutions that are there to ensure gender equality, the need to review our laws to see whether we have the right frameworks that we need, the need to recognize where injustice is taking place and address it, whether it is economic justice or it is about the dignity of a person. We need to recognize that and come together as women. We need to include all stakeholders, including men, to ensure that the fight for gender equality is achieved. So thank you very, very much to our speakers. We appreciate the time that you took to be with us this morning, now afternoon. I also want to thank our partners, the Lead Like Mandela Institute and the Thembekile Mandela Institute, and all the behind the scene people at the Center for Human Rights, the University of Pretoria, who have made this webinar a success. We are indebted to you, and also the participants that came in and attended the webinar. We hope that it was worth your while. We thank you very, very much. And with that, I wish you a very good afternoon.
Chairperson, I'd like to just quote in closing, just to add to your comment, firstly, to thank all our panelists and participants for the role and for sharing today, their views and their expertise and experience. And, I want to quote from Nelson Mandela just quickly in his speech that he spoke about. He says, the success requires women to organize, to define your needs and priorities, to bring them to the attention of government. It will require that you speak with a clear and united voice. It will require speedy movement towards a national and truly representative voice of the women of South Africa. It said also that government, well, these policies should ensure that government does not merely pay lip service to its policies concerning women, but actively implements them. I think this is a message that Nelson Mandela spoke in 1996, and it's as pertinent and important today that we take that from there. In closing, I would also like to honor the women in our lives, in my life, you know, my mom, my wife, my daughter and sisters, who have made an impact in my life, and I stand here before you today because of them. And we also like to pay special tribute to Ambassador Zindzi Mandela, who has just recently handed the baton to us and, you know, showed us the example of what a woman could do. And as a youth at the age of 25, the power that she had. And this is the power that I would like, you know, that we recognize and celebrate of women to transform the world. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Dr. Zim. In conclusion, happy Women's Day, happy Women's Month to the women of South Africa, and thank you once again for taking part in this webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.